Good afternoon. I pray that your weekend you found spaces and places of joy, of peace, of happiness, that you had time to relax, time to practice self-care, time to love up on yourself. We tend to spend so much time during the rest of our week giving to others, doing for others, making sure everyone else is good, that I always recommend that we take intentional time to love up on ourselves, to practice self-care, to treat ourselves as well as we treat others, because we are worth it. Today I want to talk about, and it seems like great minds think alike because my daughter did a video about this earlier, but trust me, I had thought about this when I was walking even earlier this morning. One of the great impediments to change is comparison. Comparing your progress to someone else. That is one of the things that will trip you up quick, fast, and in a hurry. Now, if you're a survivor of a trauma, you already probably suffered with low self-esteem. You probably already suffered with issues of feeling shame and feeling guilt and feeling less than and feeling unworthy. And as you go through the healing process, a large part of the process is learning how to love yourself, learning how to have faith in yourself, learning how to trust yourself, learning how not to take on other people's stuff, learning how to validate that what happened to you was not your fault. But that can all be side railed really quickly if we start to judge our progress based on someone else's, if we fall into that sticky place called comparisons. And I want to give a really quick example of how we sometimes unknowingly do it, and this has nothing much to do with change, but with social media. You know, if you scroll through social media, I don't care, it's usually between Instagram and Facebook. I don't see a lot of this on Twitter, but Instagram and Facebook, you would think that everybody who you know, everyone who's in your friends list on your timeline are living much better lives than you. And that's simply because they tend to only post the good parts. They tend to only post when things are going well. Now, I do have some friends who will post whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. They are very intentional about allowing the world to see all of them, including their highlights as well as their flaws and their challenges. And that's what I'm attempting to do with you all. But for some, just watching all these people's triumphs and the Bay vacations and look at how well my children did and I lost X amount of weight and just bought a house, looking at all these positive thought posts, instead of being really happy for the other people, we begin to compare ourselves. We begin to judge ourselves. We begin to send messages to ourselves about, well, why am I not at that level? What am I doing wrong? I'm just a failure. I'm no good. Now, trust me, if your questions, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not at that level? That can lead you to become motivated, to become more focused, to become more intentional about reaching your goal. But unfortunately, if you've already been dealing with lack of self-esteem, if you already are dealing with issues of guilt and shame, if you already don't love yourself as much as you should, instead of hearing those messages as motivators, they actually become messages to just bring you further down. The reality is people's progress is very individualized. Some people, we all come from different starting places. One of the things that I never really understood until recently, but let's say you have two people who made the decision to lose weight, and one person is significantly more overweight than the other. Well, typically if they follow the exact same eating regimen, the exact same workout regimen, typically the person who has more weight to lose initially will lose more weight. And that's because they have more to go. That's because, I don't really know, but that typically is what happened. But if we compare ourselves and say, oh, she lost 5 pounds and I lost a quarter of a pound, and you are doing the exact same thing, as opposed to giving up, You may want to look at metabolism. You may want to look at maybe the changes that the heavier person is making have a much more radicalized effect on their body. And for you, it may be closer to what your normal eating habits have been anyway. Back years ago, the church I belonged to, we would do the Daniel fast at the beginning of the year. And I've been either vegan or vegetarian for most of my adult life. And so when they would give us the fast, a lot of people would complain because one of the things you can't have is meat. But it was kind of what I was doing anyway. So what I would have to do in order to really feel like I was participating, I had to adjust mine and give up things that actually meant something to me, something that would be harder for me. So it may be, even though I don't eat meat, I'm going to focus on maybe doing raw for a time period or something like that. But it's not about comparison. And having said that about the veganism, vegetarianism, people who eat meat, a lot of times there's comparisons among that grouping. What I have to say is do what's best for you. What may be best for me, what may be undergirding my decisions, what may be promoting my progress or lack thereof, has all to do with everything that I bring to the table. The same way whether how your progress goes or doesn't go has a lot to do with what was underlying, what you bring to your table. If you're not making as much progress as someone else is doing, maybe you need to increase your positive affirmations to yourself. Maybe the focus is to begin to work on believing in yourself. Maybe the focus is honoring yourself and saying, wherever I am today, if I did not do the thing I said that I was not going to do, then it's been a success. And even if I do it, it's okay. I can continue to keep going. I don't have to compare myself to someone else who seems to be doing fabulously well. Another thing that impacts and makes comparisons really not a great thing to do is we all have different ways of approaching things. There may be people who, when they decide to make a change, they stop and jump up right out the bat and they just do it. Good example, my uncle, who's no longer with us, a friend of his died from lung cancer. And when he was with his friend in the hospital, when the man died, my uncle just quit smoking. Cold turkey. He never picked up another cigarette again. And I would replay that story in my head because, as I've said before, it took me 3 years to quit smoking. 3 years of stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. But I did not compare my progress to his because I understood that his motivation was drastically different than mine. I understood that his why, his reason for doing it, was very different than my reason for doing it. And so that helped to motivate his ability to stay stopped, where I was vacillating all over the place. If something went bad, I picked up a pack of cigarettes. And then we would back off to the races again. And then, a couple of weeks later, I would say, okay, this is it. This is it. It took me longer, but I eventually stayed stopped. So, it talks about slow and steady wins the race, or you can come out the gate going as fast as you can. The issue doesn't matter how you get to the finish line. It's the fact of don't compare your progress. That's one of the things that I like about yoga and why I do yoga. I should say why I do yoga with my eyes closed. I learned this early on because when I first started, and I've had a lot of stop starts with it, I would be looking at other people around beside me and I'd be like, oh, I can't do that. They're so much more flexible. I really need to leave the room. I'm really out of shape. I would feel really, really bad. And then I would drop out. Then I may come back a couple of months later. But what helped me in terms of being able to honor that what I'm doing, whatever I'm doing when I'm on a yoga mat is okay, is I began to do it with my eyes closed. And therefore, I could hear what the instructor was saying, but I was not looking at people and judging and comparing to how easy it appeared to be for them. or how they did not appear to be struggling, or look at them and say, now how come everybody else in the room can do this particular pose and I can't, and then feel bad about myself. With my eyes closed, the only person I was comparing myself to was me. And so I began to, when I shifted my focus, I began to see small progress. I began to honor that when I, am in a particular pose that I found really hard, that I could stay in it a little bit longer. I'm going to share with you when I really began to stop comparing myself to other people in yoga. I used to, and I was busy comparing people, at a certain point in the practice, I would be looking at the clock saying, how much longer we got to be here? How much longer we got to be here? Because I was not focused on the practice. I was focused on, do I look silly? I'm not looking as well as everybody else. I'm probably the oldest person in the room. People in the room don't even look like me, and that's why they're more flexible. All the lies and all the things that we tell ourselves. But when I stopped focusing on everybody else, when I stopped making comparisons, the way I realized it was getting better is I realized I was able to be in the practice longer and longer before I looked at the clock. Notice I wasn't comparing myself with anyone else. I'm now comparing myself with me. And so my goal is I may never be able to fully get my head on the floor in a child's pose. I may always need to use props, but that's okay because I'm not doing it to compare myself to someone else. I'm not judging my progress by someone else. I'm simply doing it because I am doing it for me. I am honoring me. I am loving me. So I encourage you, with whatever change you decided to make in your life, stop comparing your progress with someone else. And I ask you to stop that comparison intentionally on purpose. You are doing a fabulous job. You are moving towards that finish line, and however long it may take to get there, or how quickly, you are fabulous. Love you. Talk with you tomorrow. Bye-bye.